Well, good evening, Soul Butterflies. I trust you're having a wonderful Wednesday evening. You are listening to Soma Fusion Radio with your host, Katie Kamara, coming to you live from the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. We are broadcasting to you live this fine evening on Facebook Live, soma-fusion.com, YouTube, and the official somafusion.media.com website. For those who do not know who I am or what I do outside of this radio show, I am an Australian native whose writes and talks continues to reach a worldwide audience while I continue breaking ground in alternative metaphysical science, thought and research, journalism, public speaking, illustration, and soulful emotional therapy. I am an active advocate of human rights and access to justice, the development of healthy interpersonal relationships, trauma healing, and sovereign empowerment of men and women worldwide to reach the highest human potential to help people see themselves no longer as victims of any situation or hardships they encounter throughout their lives. As a interdisciplinary in applied social sciences, psychology, and integrated alternative medicine, and a healer with a firm base on the scope of the human mind, body, and soul. There is much to discuss on Soma Fusion Radio tonight. I hope you have, like always, your pens and paper handy, because if you don't, just listen and you can catch the archive of the show later on YouTube. But first, the official advertisers of Soma Fusion Radio, Conscious Apparel Co., has stepped into the forefront of expanding consciousness through fashion. Conscious Apparel Co. prides itself in providing aesthetic apparel that performs the role of elevating consciousness and spreading love. You can find those guys at consciousapparelco.com. And I have a promo code for you. We are one word for 20% off of their apparel. ASEA, their products are the first and only source outside the body to provide balanced, stabilized redox signaling molecules which promote health at the cellular level. You can find those guys at 1-800-285-370.myasea.live.com. We're also supported by Santosha Co. Santosha Co. is a skincare company that specializes in natural and organic skincare products. Many of their ingredients that go into their products are handpicked from their farm in northern Wisconsin. I am a user of their products and I do endorse them. You can find those guys at santosha.co. FNX Fitness. FNX Fitness is located in North Salt Lake, Utah. They're committed to creating innovative supplements of the highest quality that provide focus for a productive morning, energy to thrive all day, performance supplements to reach new goals, unique sleep and recovery formulas to support any sport, and healthy supplements to support an active lifestyle for years to come. You can find those guys at fnxfit.com with the promo code COLLAB, COLLAB, for 25% off of all FNX Fit products. If you support me and my work, you can make a donation via PayPal or at Patreon at patreon.com/Soma Fusion. Also, I'm going to encourage you to come and join my courses at the Soma Fusion Academy. For more information on Soma Fusion Academy, again, go to soma-fusion.com. We still have the challenges going on right now. I have recently just relaunched the 30-day intimacy challenge. So if you want to know more about that, please email me with your queries at somafusionacademy@gmail.com. And be sure to go on Facebook because there is a group for the Soma Fusion Academy. You can go over there, send a request, answer a couple questions that I've asked you, and there's lots to learn in that group as well. Also, I am the co-host of another radio show, Goddesses and Devils, with myself, Amanda McManus, and Donna Gorton. We discuss various topics that are very taboo in nature, from life to relationships, spirituality, empowerment, psychology-based subjects. We don't hold anything back, literally. So don't miss that wildly popular show starting at 9 p.m. Eastern every Sunday evening. Stay tuned to all social media platforms and soma-fusion.com, and of course our new Soma Fusion Media page on Facebook, and for all show times and keep up with all of my work and the work of others, well, there are quite a few other shows on Soma Fusion Media, which I suggest for you guys to check out. Any inquiries that you have, you can email them to me at somafusionmedia@gmail.com. For new listeners who have never listened to Soma Fusion Radio, it comes as no surprise. I am a radio show host who likes to raise awareness and educate to empower others to reach individual potential, mind, body, and soul. In the beginning, and I will say, it was great. We have a lot of guests that come on, and of course, we know that the information that our guests and myself can provide can transform even every single moment, an ordinary circumstance into a profoundly moving experience while living in the moment. But one thing I love to delve into is very hard topics, especially those that are extremely taboo and critically controversial or extremely academic. To those who are involved in their own beliefs, I will tell you right now that I do explore them with critical open thinking and express them without judgment and social inclusion of all. One thing I will never do on my show is express for you to jump exclusively onto my boat of values, beliefs, or ideologies, but share them with you as a process of diverse learning as a unified, harmonious community. And with that said, I encourage each and every one of you listeners out there who are listening to join our conversation. I may not be able to watch the Facebook live chat or over on YouTube, but I am monetarily watching it. So don't think I'm ignoring you over there. But you don't have to believe anything that I do say on this show. The most important thing for you to do is to research and learn for yourself with a curious, open mind. And of course, tonight's topic is exclusively a topic that is always going to be close to my heart, as many topics are. And over the next month, I will be covering huge subjects to raise awareness in metaphysical science topics, so spirituality. And of course, tonight, we're going to be talking about involution. Now, consciousness is fundamental. Contrary to most of today's Western modern scientists who still try to compute consciousness with all of the major Eastern religions and philosophies, but they do agree on one thing. Consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe and existed before, well, pretty much everything. It is the universe. The true and highest, most subtle consciousness is present in all of us. So if we were to think like a scientist, it's man. But it is hidden under the veils of mind and matter. This state is known as involution of consciousness. But what causes this involution? The process of evolution of creation. And as we'll understand, the evolution of the levels of creation is directly paralleled by the descending of consciousness from higher to lower levels. So in a sense, they are intrinsically linked and one implies the other. And with this knowledge, why should you care? Well, the point is that to be happy, we must focus and allow our inner higher spirit to be allowed to evolve and connect back to the higher levels of consciousness that exist in the universe. True happiness comes from self-realization, and it is not found in the material plane. When we understand that consciousness descended many levels from the highest region of the spirit, or other words known as the soul, through the region of the universal mind and through the region of the mind, which is the physical, and that this is the process of evolution of creation, we realize that our goal is to connect back to the highest spiritual region. So no matter how much we say that we are not spiritual in nature, we really in fact are. Now we can have and understand that the world around us actually consists of three regions: spirit, mind, and physical. And that is the act of descending of the consciousness, and in ways we are still able to understand. That is manifested and created in this universe around us. Now, here we are as humans at one of the lowest creation or consciousness levels in the universe. But all is not lost. The nature of true self or spirit is known as Sat Chit Anand, which is translated as truth, knowledge, bliss. The force or energy of the primordial consciousness or supreme being or Brahman, nature and the universe is perfect, and we are truly spiritual beings. So much that man is a perfect microism of macroism, meaning that we are a fractal, a hologram of the entire universe, and we have the capabilities, the portals, to connect and communicate to the highest spiritual state. And we can reach this through appropriate methods of meditation and intuition. And just as the entire macroism consists of 3 regions, so does man. Spiritual, mind, and physical regions in this microism that make it a perfect fractal or reflection of the entire universe, macroism. As consciousness descended from a unity and non-dual nature to the lowest levels, and of course in Hinduism, there are 18 levels of consciousness. In spirituality, if you are non-religious in any way, there are 7. And I'll go through that in this show to show you exactly what I mean. Of material consciousness, ego, and duality, it is important to realize that the consciousness we perceive is not at all ultimate truth or reality, and that we have the capability to remove the layers of ignorance and connect back to our highest self and the ultimate supreme being consciousness. Now, Mani Sundaram says it like this, and I quote, "One can understand how spirit is hidden under different sheaths. Suppose that you are bathing in sunshine, lying in an armchair in your garden and enjoying the tranquility of it. Suddenly, a wandering cloud comes on the sun and hides it, stopping the nice sun shining come to you. You are not in the direct contact with it. Now you're experiencing it under a shadow. More layers of cloud cover the sun. You lose sight of it altogether. And as it happens in a rainy day, now you also lose tranquility. But the sun has not moved from the place or changed. But what has happened? The same thing has happened to the Supreme Being's pure spiritual consciousness. And therefore, it is there for us to discover by uncovering the different sheaths. And this is done through meditation. But let's go into evolution for a second. Now, Charles Darwin just had recently, his birthday was in February. Don't ask me what date it was. But Charles Darwin just had his birthday, his 212th birthday to be exact. People are trying to reconcile his ideas with the spirit. And so far, all parties, secular and scientific and religious, seem far away from understanding the true nature of evolution. Evolution takes place for any entity when it organizes itself at a higher level. When a business develops a strategic plan to grow, it is essentially organizing itself and then executing a plan, which creates further progress for the company. When I, as an individual, plan out what I want to become, I organize the details and then carry it out. I can rapidly progress. If the organization or individual plans and succeeds in going not just a bit further, but to a substantially new level, there is not only progress, but evolution. And then there is a single process of accomplishment and creation that is taking life in its place, a conception of that which we wish to become, the organization of the details of that vision, and an intense execution that enables the aspiration and the intention to manifest. When that process is practical to perfection, it enables not only progress, but evolution. Even the spiritual reality in creating a universe from its divine source followed this same essential approach. It conceived that which it wished to create, a universe, and it organized and made it happen through the powers of consciousness that returned or turned conscious force into unseen subtle energy that became the basis of the forms of creation. It evolved itself further into a universe. And if we are to understand evolution, we need to understand this single great process of creation that moves from vision to organization to manifestation. Even when a primitive being or an animal evolves, there is some higher quality that is being organized, that is moving from its current level of being to a higher order. And we can see this as a perfect example in the film 2001, A Space Odyssey, where the ape vaguely perceives that a bone it has found can be used. He tries it out and then uses it to gain superiority over his rivals. It is the organization of a perception into living reality. Evolution is then a product of the organization of consciousness. Whether it is consciously, subconsciously, or unconsciously, takes place, as in the case of an amoeba. There is another dimension to this evolutionary process. It is that the higher levels of progress, development, and evolution that entities move towards and eventually attain are already involved in their being. Just as a tree emerges of seed, in which of all its existence is mostly predetermined, so too there is an involved capacity to bring about the next stage of or phase of its being, growth. When the lowest forms lowest life forms, emerged from unanimated matter, that matter already had within it an involved capacity to develop into an animated life form. Likewise, if I wish to become more intuitively spiritual, a higher formation of mentality that has capacity is already there, involved as potential in my current mental framework. It is there in the seed of my being as potential. Thus, not only is there one universal process of creation that moves from stages of vision to organization to manifestation through a movement of higher consciousness, but the stages we can evolve to are already there embedded in our being as potentiality. And this is the case because in the creation of the cosmos from divine source, those very planes of being were there before the universe even existed. And in creation, we're then embedded in the forms that emerge, including us. For example, a plane of mind existed before the universe came to be, and higher life forms developed a mind with the capacity to think. This pre-existence of the planes that we are emerging to from an involved seed of consciousness that is rooted in these very planes prior to creation is another dimension to evolution. And thus we can say that the evolutionary process is able to occur because this involutionary process has created these potentialities in the very fiber of our being. The planes that emerge from us were already involved in us as a seed in subtle form. Through the process of conception, vision, intention, organization of the intent, and then carrying out the intent as we progress. If it is substantial, for example, there is a dramatic change for the positive, it is more than progress, but evolution. Remember something, guys. Involution precedes evolution. And yet the seeds of our intention are already there in our being. Even as we have the free will to become the very thing we wish to become. But in the end, we become the next highest thing. We progress and evolve, which we organize that which is the emerging, turning it into living reality. And we as humans can consciously do this and accelerate the speed of the evolution of man. Now, as I was prepping for this show earlier today, I was going to go all east versus west on you. But what's the point in that? And because I'm in an awesome mood, and I think this March we will take a step back and learn more about ourselves in a fun way. So for tonight, I'm going to talk about the evolution on the involutional spiritual path. And yes, yours truly has tried, tested, and I'm teaching it. But let's look at the New Age approach, or the new approach of the New Age. The 21st century shall go down in history as the age of the soul. In other words, we are collectively awakening to the reality of the soul. In intuitive philosophy, the soul is also called the thinker. As we can see, therefore, the development of soul consciousness inevitably involves the awakening and the activation of our mental faculties. And for that reason, the development of our mind is high on the evolutionary agenda for humanity today. Currently, we are mostly emotionally polarized, which means our consciousness is focused through our emotions, and therefore we mainly look at life through the lens of emotion. The thoughts we think, the words we say, the things we do are all greatly influenced by our desires and our emotions. To become soul conscious, we have to raise our consciousness out of the emotional plane and into the plane of the mind. We have to become mentally polarized. And with regards to our spiritual path, what that means is that our approach to spirituality also has to transition from an emotional to a mental one. In other words, as we delve into the age of the soul, we have to begin to approach spiritual path from a more scientific point of view. And as we do so, we shall arrive at the realization that everything the great teachers of the past, such as Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Confucius, the Greek philosophers, and others, have said is in truth pure science. The language they used to speak to our emotions since given our collective emotional polarization, this was the only language we were able to understand. However, in the 21st century, our collective task involves the scientific formulation of the spiritual path. And this is why practices such as trance, channeling, as it's currently commonly understood in the New Age, mediumship, lower psychism, etc., which are all astral in nature or psychic development in nature, will slowly but surely die out. They have no place in the mentally polarized world and soul-conscious individual. They had their rightful place in our earlier Atlantean evolution. However, they are not a part of our future. They are involutionary, not evolutionary. So don't get mixed up on what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that psychic development is not going to be on the forefront. The future belongs to those higher disciplines that evolve our thinking, our intuition, our telepathic abilities. The future belongs to those practices that aim at the restoration, the science of the continuity of consciousness, and the development of soul consciousness in our brain awareness. And as we actively engage in these new scientific disciplines, that the inner education for the age of the soul has in store for us, we will be in the position to approach life from a new, higher, more expanded perspective, from the perspective of the soul. And this greater perspective would then give us immense inner peace and joy, because for the first time we will be actually able to see the bigger picture and the purpose of our existence. But right now, we don't know anything for sure. We hope that there is a life after death, but we don't know for sure. We guess our personal situation, health, wealth, and relationships has something to do with our inner life or of our thoughts and emotions, but we don't know that with certainty. We believe there is something like a God, but we can't prove it. And as we approach these questions and others from a more scientific point of view, and as we learn to tune in to our higher abstract mind and intuition, and as we learn to develop our higher senses and mechanisms of contact, our emotion-based guessing and hoping will soon make a place for scientific certainty and knowingness. Involution and evolution. So what is all this? What is the spiritual path all about? Various schools of thought and philosophy talk about the so-called spiritual path. But what actually is the spiritual path all about? Why is there such thing as a spiritual path? And what is it good for? What does it have to do with you and me? In intuitive philosophy, there is a concept called involution and evolution. In Eastern philosophy, sometimes is referred to as in-breath and out-breath of Brahma. Very simplified. Involution deals with the process of subjective life getting involved in matter. It is the process of life involving itself in substance, clothing itself in a form commonly called body, and using that form as a means of expression. The word involution comes from the Latin involere, in meaning in, and volere meaning to roll. So involution literally means to roll into, to envelope, to surround. Involution is the process of divine life rolling into matter, so to speak. And of course, it is the process of divine life involving itself in substance or descending into matter. In order to express itself in matter, matter just being densified spirit. Another word, evolution, comes from the Latin involere, ex meaning out, and volere meaning to roll. So evolution deals with the process of unrolling. Evolution is what happens when the divine life, after having gotten involved with matter, after having clothed itself in a body, after having rolled into a body, if you can say that, adapts itself and uses the form to perfect it, to make it a perfect expression of the indwelling life, with the goal of liberating itself from the environing form once it outgrows it. So evolution is the process whereby this spark of life, after having been planted into substance, so to speak, uses the form to make it a perfect expression of the indwelling life. And so from a certain lens and perspective, this process of perfection is the process of evolution. And so part of the idea of the involution, evolution, is to perfect the relationship between life and form. You might commonly hear it from me when we talk about duality, yin and yang, perfect balance. In the inner and outer world, you must create balance. Life clothes itself into a form that is adequate for its needs and expresses itself with the goal of evolving or unrolling. The indwelling life unrolls or evolves through experiences. As the life within grows and expands, the indwelling life outgrows the form, so to speak. So the form disintegrates. That's what we commonly call death. And the indwelling life, which has a sense of imprisoned in the form, frees itself and repeats the process on a higher level with a subtler form within a higher body, on a higher plane or a dimension of reality, all the way back to source. And so, very, very simplified, this is obviously a simplification of a very, very complex, multidimensional process that cannot be grasped by rational thinking, but requires the faculty of intuition. The spirit of divinity descends, and the indwelling life goes through experiences, and growing through them, evolving through them, ascends. So from that lens and perspective, the process of involution and evolution is the process of descension and ascension. And now come back to our original question. What is the so-called spiritual path all about? Why is there such a thing? And what does it have to do with you and me? Ultimately, the spiritual path involves both the process of descension and ascension. However, luckily, the process of descension is already behind us, at least from a linear perspective. And even though from a higher perspective, there is no such thing as a linear past and future and all the rest. And so anyway, this evening in the 21st century, when we talk about the spiritual path, we are talking about evolution. We are talking about the path of return to source. Whatever you call source. Could be God, could be higher self, could be anything. The oneness. Or could be nothing. But the process of evolution is a process of identification. And at first, we identify with the physical body, then with our emotions, then with our mind, then with our personality, and then with our soul, and then with our monad or high, divine self. Then ultimately, we re-identify with the source and the oneness. So essentially, that's what evolution is all about. And that's what that so-called spiritual path is all about. And in a sense, it is a process of identification and disidentification. We disidentify from the lower self and identify with our higher self. We disidentify from our higher self and identify with our divine self. And so we are unrolling and evolving. And in the end, what remains is a spark of divinity, our true identity, enriched with infinite wisdom gained from the experience of getting involved with matter. Matter, again, is just being densified spirit. But what does that have to do with you and me in our daily lives? It has everything to do with it. We all have a life, right? But what is a life? Why do we all have to have a life? And what are we supposed to do with it? The purpose of our life is to allow the divine life, to allow divine essence to express itself in form. And the soul or the higher self, whatever you want to call it, within us lovingly pushes us on to express this essence in our daily life, whether we realize it or not. That's the goal of evolution. Now, sooner or later in this life or another life, there will come a moment in the life of every single person in the world where the truth of a higher plane or higher reality will start to dawn upon them. And the moment we start getting it, this is when we consciously step onto the spiritual path. This is when we consciously strive to express the essence of divine life in our daily life and consciousness. And so this is when the real growth happens. The moment we consciously step into and onto our spiritual path, the moment we get it, the moment we start working towards it, and we attain more growth in one lifetime than we did in the last, 100 incarnations together. So every single person in the world is on a spiritual path, whether they realize it or not, or whatever name they may want to give it. And so it concerns all of us. And quite frankly, there is a lot more to all of this. For example, the interplay between spirit and matter creates a magnetic field to which we give the name consciousness. And that too seems pretty important, right? Think about it. But blending Eastern mysticism with Western practicality, involution is a word that represents the inner evolution of the heart, mind, and soul. Involution is not a dogma or a creed or a doctrine, but an experiential practice of life. And you can observe it everywhere. It's a philosophy of life. And contrary to evolution, which is externally focused and yet still necessary, involution is the transformation of the internal world through the inner work processes of self-awareness, self-discovery, self-understanding, self-love, self-transformation, and self-mastery. And you all know that I have spoken about all of these topics before. You have to go back onto YouTube and go over to the playlist that says Soma Fusion Radio guests and appearances. And you will see that there is many topics that I've spoken about that touch base with what I'm talking about this evening. Ultimately, it is the involution that helps us to transform, to liberate us from suffering through the process of internal growth and spiritual awakening. Involution can help us overcome our pain, lessening our suffering, and live authentically again. It can help us to stop fragmenting our lives, providing us with passion, direction, and wholeness. Involution can also help us transcend our repetitive routines, blinding beliefs, and stagnating ways of life. And all we need to do is adopt the philosophy that transforming internally is just as important as progressing externally. And by the way, there are 7 crucial facets of involution, which I'll explore a little later. But for too long, many of us have been stranded, fighting, striving, and struggling to better our external lives. Better jobs, better clothes, better cars, better relationships, better social statuses, better financial situations. Some part of us tends to believe that to nurture our external lives is to become better, smarter, more whole people. But it doesn't. And most of us feel weary, bitter, alone, and disillusioned at the end of the day. This is why involution, the evolution of our inner selves, is desperately needed. But why do we need this new approach to life? Involution is needed because we are undergoing an unprecedented level of psychological, emotional, and spiritual suffering as a species. And it's only getting worse. We need an internal evolution because we are slaves to our bodies, slaves to our minds, slaves to our emotions. We are also slaves to other people and slaves of the very society that conditions our minds with false, misleading, oppressive, and repressive beliefs and values. Evolution has brought us to the necessary point of personal freedom and innovation in history, where we can progress in new and exciting ways. However, this is a path that focuses solely on the external world, that of materialism. But what about the soul? What about that heart of yours? What about the transformation of our own consciousness? And these are the missing keys to endless issues we face today of environmental destruction, social collapse, worldwide mental health crises, mass extinctions, famine, disease, epidemics, and the slow decline of our planet into inner chaos. Involution is the way forward because it is all true, deep, and long-lasting changes happen within. When our energy is focused exclusively on the external world, we're like ghosts, alienated from our inner wellspring of truth, living a shallow existence driven by futile, materialistic pursuits. And look where that got us as a species. But how does this matter and relate to spiritual awakening? Here's an analogy that describes the painful process of waking up. There is a large machine situated on a space of land. You were born as a cog in that machine, and since birth you were taught that you were part of this machine. You had few slim choices of what roles in the machine you wished to function as. But this was as far as your freedom reached. There are some cogs in which are more important than others for their functions in this machine. They are highly respected by the other cogs who aspire to be respected by like them someday. However, in their free time, all these cogs do different kinds of superfluous things to distract themselves from their truth of their situation. That they are trapped in a machine prison. But one day, you eventually stop and reevaluate how meaningless you feel in functioning and begin to awaken the desire that you want to be free from the machine. And you suggest this idea to the other cogs. But they respond, free from what? We are the machine. All of those who have undergone a spiritual awakening process, a shift to involution, can relate to the comparison that I've just mentioned. The first two questions that come to you after realizing you're not the machine and can be liberated from it are, who am I? And what is my true purpose? This is the beginning of an immensely fulfilling process of involution, the beginning of the inner path of transformation, the journey of walking your authentic path. However, this spiritual awakening process does not arise without some form of inner suffering, some degree of despair, anger, loneliness, and we'll explore this as well. Nietzsche quoted, "A day will come when loneliness shall weary you, when your pride shall writhe and your courage gnash its teeth. And in that day you shall cry, I am alone. A day will come when you shall see your high things no more, and your low things all too near. You shall fear your exaltation as if it were a phantom. And in that day you will cry, all is false." But is there a problem of seeing too deep and seeing too and seeing too much? There is a type of loneliness that transcends all others. And it isn't born from a lack of company. And it doesn't share the toys of an inner rich world that comes with solitary introversion. Nor does it have anything to do with depression, but rather it is a kind of loneliness, is a spiritual affliction. This loneliness brings feelings of emptiness, of having nothing, and having an extraordinary uncertainty in everything. This feeling is a rare experience that comes to a person who has seen too deep and too much. And yet is the beginning of the revolutionary process of involution. The person who has seen too deep and too much has become aware of the unreality of their lives. And to them, the ordinary structure of society loses its values as they realize the fictitious nature of this matrix. This same illusional matrix where they had been projecting all their hopes and desires. But what if they thought was real? Everything around them in their life is real. Turns out to be false. Then all the ambitions and aspirations they wanted to accomplish in it are lost immediately, leaving them with questions. Who am I? What am I doing here? Questions of existence. And these questions are the unconscious cause of that spiritual void we all carry and the deepest origin of existential crisis. As humans, we constantly escape with such deep questions, with all types of distractions, movies, books, careers, social frivolities, sex, and recreational, religious, or patriotic fanaticism. We'll do anything but choose to be alone with ourselves and face these questions. Asking deep questions. Evolution is something we grow into rather than inherit from our entire society. And it starts by asking the deep questions. Where did this come from? Why does this happen? What is real versus false here? What is my true path? Tend to awaken something deep within us. And these questions help us realize that society we live in is nothing more than a contrived illusion where we blindly create our own sufferings. That the notion of countries is merely a creation of the mind. That there are no imaginary lines that separate the borders. That egotism, respect are false and relative identities. That your name, nationality, and beliefs aren't you. You were simply taught them. And what we call love is less like unconditional love than it is a conditional neurotic dependency. And that money is nothing but a colorful symbolic piece of paper to motivate the social herds into labor with delusions of freedom. Most of us are driven by the ambitions of achievement. And when all of this is taken away upon realizing there's nothing to achieve, we're left with the elastical dilemma. Vanitatum vanitas. Or Latin translation, nothing is worth doing. In fact, a normal part of shifting our energy from outside to inside is going or undergoing through a dark night of the soul, where we feel totally lost and abandoned by life and God. Faith. But thankfully, this experience doesn't last forever. And eventually we start to adapt to our new role of the outsider. J. Krishnamurti said in his book, Think on These Things, he stated, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." So what of that being an outsider? Those experiencing and living by the philosophy of involution will understand how important it is to focus our attention inside ourselves rather than externally onto the sickness of society. All true changes, after all, start deep inside of us. as individuals. Naturally, the result of asking deep questions, having a total life-shattering perspective shift, or trying to seek truth means that we'll become outsiders. We become strange, offbeat, and abnormal to those in society very quickly. However, if the people in our culture were truly normal, they would find the state of society untruthful, distasteful, and impossible to adjust to. If they were truly normal, they would reject the toxic, sick, and backward belief and behaviors propagated to keep us enslaved and rebel and becoming outsiders. Rebelling against the atypical. Perhaps the hardest thing about rebelling as an outsider is that we innately struggle to belong. We cannot find a home within typical normal society because it contradicts our very nature, our deepest discoveries, epiphanies, feelings, and values. For instance, your typical job is draining 50 years of work unrelated to your true passions. Your belief system isn't fulfilling either, especially when deep down you know that it creates a world replete with inequality. Furthermore, your typical health and eating habits are fundamentally unhealthy. Not to mention the thousands of dollars of typical debt you have in your bank account. Even your typical marriage is statistically bound for failure. While your typical lack of self-exploration leads to a personally unfulfilled and emotionally reactive life. Outsiders who walk the path of involution have learnt that society's standards have nothing to do with their own. Does having higher standards mean think that they're better than everybody else? Of course not. It means everyone else is running below their capacity. And outsiders want to make up for the distance. But many will argue that if we're all so typical, how did we create such brilliant innovations in science, spirituality, technology, literature, and so forth? In fact, it was not our human species as a whole who delivered these incredible feats, but a fierce outsider individuals who deviated from the comfortable typical, such as Socrates, Jesus, Galileo, Jung, Picasso, who were often received harshly by the typicals of their time. The reality is here, to be an outsider takes courage. To be typical takes conformity. The fear of sticking out and screwing up is too great for the typical person. The safest way is the old way, the proven way, the boring way, the typical way. This is why shifting from the external to the internal is the way of involution. It is so revolutionary that it takes so much heroism. Robert Frost mentioned in The Road Not Taken, and I quote, "I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere, ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And with that said, we are going to take a break. You are listening to Soma Fusion Radio with your host Katie Kamara on Soma Fusion Media. For more information, please look me up on social media or go to my website, soma-fusion.com or somafusionmedia.com. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and share out this show and let the whole world know what we're learning each week. And invite them to listen with us. And when we come back, we're going to be switching gears and we're going to be talking all about the 7 paths of involution. See you in a few.
Grandma told me I look just like you, flawless, strong and fragile like a dove. I wonder will I grow to be as tall as you were to me. You were perfect, bathed me in your love. I was young, now I know sometimes you cried alone. I've learned the world isn't black and white. When you made me look away, no, you never meant to hurt me. You kept marching on. A faded picture of you at my age. A candid smile I hardly recognize. When you close your eyes at night, do you dream of your past life? I never know what's going through your mind. I was young, now I know sometimes you took the plunge. Those nights you prayed, you were terrified. You'd say, go figure it out. Darling, no one knows the answer. You keep marching on. You keep marching on. Sometimes I wonder if I was born as your reincarnation. But I could never be like you. I'm a child without patience. Did you mean that? Did you mean that when you told me that I'm your dream? You keep marching on. 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 I'm surrounded by people. Why do I feel so alone? Wondering how do I disappear? I just laugh and play along. I wanna be free, but I'm a slave to the voices that echo in my head. They make it look so easy, but my body's a graveyard that buries all of my emotions. I was crying underwater. Would you see my tears? to shut up, then I give up. I'm flicking through the screen. Oh, swimming upstream like I'm trapped in this ocean, trying to find my way back home. Would you dive in to save me? I'm crying on the water, crying on the water, crying on the water. Oh, I'm crying on the water, crying on the water. I'm crying on the water.
Who are you? What have you become? What have you done to this beautiful kingdom? I don't want your guns, I don't want your poisons, I don't want your weapons and tools of mass distractions. I don't want your red flags, don't want your baggage, I don't want your hate speech, your supremacy. Where are your whys? Where is your rough edge? Don't tell me you've traded it for comfort and privilege. I don't want your fast foods, I don't need to buy shit. I don't want your miles and miles of advertisement. I don't want it, no, no, no. So step up, speak out, show up, be loud. 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 Be loud. Peace of mind or a piece of the pie. 9 to 5 living in a plastic empire. Where is the house for the wounded and homeless? Can't sleep on the streets, can't afford to own this. Everything is I, me, mine. Busy working for the dollar while the well runs dry. Minimum wages, maximum security. Simple pleasure traded for business and authority. So step up, speak out, show up, be loud. 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 Be loud. Be loud. Speak out, be loud. Be loud. Step up, show up, be loud. Step
you are right. I am watching the chat over there. Don't worry, be happy. Yeah, it seems to be the theme for the night. But we are talking about involution on Soma Fusion Radio with your host, Katie Kamara, on this fine evening. If you are listening to Soma Fusion Radio on Soma Fusion Media, go over to the Facebook page, Soma Fusion Media, and check out all the stuff we have posted up over there. Go like, share, and of course, there's plenty of stuff for you to go see. There's plenty of shows that you can watch as well. If you are wanting to know what shows we have on or advertising perks, go over to somafusionmedia.com. Go over to the YouTube channel, Soma Fusion Mind, Body, and Soul. Go over, like, and subscribe over there. Press the little bell button that will notify you every time we have a live show on that channel, which is almost every single night of the week. We do play archives throughout the day. We play some funky music that you might want to get down to. All of that can be obtained through somafusionmedia.com. So if you're feeling bored, go look us up. With that said, we are going to go back to what we were talking about before. And, of course, we're going to be talking about the 7 paths of involution. Involution is the evolution, again, of the heart, mind, and soul. And it exists as a variety of distinct yet interconnected paths. Now, this is a process that we intentionally choose to go through to live wise, authentic, and whole lives. It consists of 7 different facets: self-awareness, self-exploration, self-discovery, self-understanding, self-love, self-transformation, and again, self-mastery. All of us exist in each of these facets in differing degrees. The key here is to discover which elements you exist in the most and which elements you exist in the least. And by discovering this, it will help you see what you need to work on the most. And what I'll do right now is I'll explore each involution path in a bit of detail, just so that you can understand it. And I will deviate a little bit to give you a deeper grasp on the process itself. The first one that we're going to be talking about is self-awareness. Now, it's also called self-consciousness. Self-awareness is the ability to observe the array of thoughts, feelings, and actions that you carry out each and every single day. A self-aware person is able to identify what they are feeling, but not necessarily why they are feeling that way. And a lack of self-awareness is defined by an animal-like behavior or behaving without thinking. In other words, it's reacting. If you're a self-aware person, you have one of 2 things: the ability to introspect, the ability to be aware of your thoughts, feelings, personality, and behavior. But with self-awareness, how do we increase it in an unconscious world? To many of us, self-awareness is like a mythical unicorn. Sometimes we catch fleeting glimpses of it, but as soon as we spotted it, it vanishes into thin air. What is this mysterious quality that we think that we possess, but actually rarely do? And most importantly, why is self-awareness so important? And being self-aware is an essential part of the spiritual journey. In fact, without this fundamental quality, there can be no hope of spiritual or psychological growth. Self-awareness is the very first stepping stone towards expanded consciousness and experiences such as deeper self-understanding, more self-compassion, increased love for others. And I'll explore them and its many benefits later. But in the meantime, let's attempt to paint a picture of this magical and oh so sly unicorn. So, what is self awareness? Self awareness is the ability to introspect and be aware of your own thoughts, feelings, impulses, physical sensations, and behaviors. At a basic level, self awareness is the ability to pay attention to who you are and what makes you tick. At more complex levels, self awareness involves developing an understanding of your deeper beliefs, your inner wounds, your mental and emotional defense mechanisms, and repressed unconscious material. Again, it's also known as self-understanding. So what's the difference between self-understanding and self-awareness? And quite simply put, self-awareness is recognizing your inner landscape. On the other hand, self-understanding is using that self-awareness to figure out something about yourself. Do you see the subtle difference there? Let me repeat that again. Self-awareness is recognizing your inner landscape. And self-understanding is using that self-awareness to figure out something about yourself. But what is it about self-awareness and consciousness? Are they the same thing? They aren't. The difference between humans and most animals is that humans possess both self-awareness and consciousness, while most animals only possess instinctual consciousness. According to one Scientific American article, it states, consciousness is the awareness of one's body and one's environment. Self-awareness is the recognition of that consciousness. In other words, consciousness is an external focus, while self-awareness is internal. I can give you some examples here. So, intellectually understanding self-awareness is all fine and dandy. But let's go to the next level here. Because, at the end of the day, Soma Fusion Radio is a teaching show. And I'm all about education. Like, to the 50th degree. So I'm going to give you some examples. What does self-awareness actually look like in action? And so here we go. Here's the first one. Angela keeps falling into toxic relationships with unavailable men. Finally, after her 5th failed relationship, she has a revelation. Some unhealed part of me is attracting these men into my life. And she's experienced a moment of self-awareness. We've all been there, ladies, of course. Daniel has a weight issue that has caused diabetes. And after coming back from work each day, he goes on a massive food binge. And suddenly, while cramming a jammy donut into his mouth, he realizes, oh, I always binge eat after coming home from work. That work must really stress me out. And he has a moment of self-awareness. Patricia struggles to make genuine connections with others. She also has an addiction to talking about people behind their backs. We all have seen the gossipers, right? In the middle of a conversation with her no-nonsense work partner, the conversations suddenly come to a halt. Why are you always gossiping about other people, Patricia? And suddenly a light bulb goes off within Patricia's head and she realizes why she can't make genuine friends. she has temporarily become self-aware. Here's another one. Raoul can't stand his father-in-law, but he isn't aware of it. His wife wants him to go to a fancy dinner with her family, but he adamantly refuses. "You won't go? I can't believe this," screams Raoul's wife as she storms out and slams the door. Raoul stands there quietly and suddenly realizes how much he dislikes his wife's father. He has now had a spark of self-awareness. Jailer, on the other hand, constantly gets into arguments with other people. She thinks it's because others are out to get her, but doesn't realize how poor her communication skills are. After interrupting her sister for the 20th time, her sister explodes. And she says, "Why do you keep fucking interrupting me, Jailer? Just let me talk already. It's no wonder you're constantly arguing with everyone. They can't stand talking to you. Show me some damn respect and let other people talk for once." Jailer bursts into tears, realizing the harsh truth behind her sister's words. She has experienced self-awareness. And LeBron has been in the dating game for years and still hasn't found the one. And in the middle of a bout depression, he realizes he has only been chasing after the girls his parents approve of. He has experienced a moment of self-awareness. And on the next date he goes on, he decides to listen to his instincts rather than the voices of his parents in his head. And after a few more dates, he finds his soulmate, thanks to listening to his intuition. His life has changed thanks to self-awareness. But here's a few other examples of being self-aware. Being self-aware of your genuine feelings and emotions. Being aware of your beliefs, your prejudice, your bias. Being aware of the way you interact with others. Being aware of your habits. Being aware of how you wish to be perceived. Being aware of your worst fears. Being aware of your inner conflicts. Being aware of your goals and your dreams. Being aware of being aware. And you might do that during meditation and contemplation. But why is self-awareness important? Developing self-awareness is so important because without it, we can easily become stuck in toxic patterns for years or even a lifetime, as many people do. Self-awareness is the very foundation of all emotional, psychological, and spiritual growth. A lack of self-awareness results in living an inauthentic and chaotic life that is driven by untamed impulses, unconscious habits, and unquestioned beliefs. And to put it simply, self-awareness is so important because without it, we become self-destructive. And how many times have you come across people who make the same mistakes over and over again? These people lack self-awareness. How many times have you seen people thrive on drama and self-destructive behavior? These people lack self-awareness. How many times have you seen people thrive on drama and whose whose aim is to inflict unspeakable violence upon others. These people also lack self-awareness. What about those who live in most of their lives in boring, stagnant, and meaningless routines? These people also lack self-awareness. But what about those who live most of their lives and tell themselves all of the above? These people also lack self-awareness. It's repetitive behavior. Do you get the drift? Give me any human problem, and I will be able to trace it back to a lack of self-awareness. And it's pretty tragic. But there is hope. There's always hope. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. And that is to make becoming self-aware a personal mission. And when you become a model of self-awareness, others around you will be also positively influenced. Be the change you wish to see in the world. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but it's very true guidance. Becoming self-aware is the number one thing you can do to make big shifts in your life. But why is it so goddamn hard to become self-aware? It's the ego, the identity or the sense of self that you carry. And it's a tricky little bugger. In order to maintain an image of itself, it must sustain and defend anything that challenges its existence. Inevitably, this need to keep up the image involves a whole lot of sly deception of yourself, resistance, subversiveness, and even a blatant avoidance of reality. In short, the ego is a bullshit factory, and that process prefers to be undisturbed and unobserved. However, we also must be thankful for our egos. Without having an ego or a separate sense of self, we'll be incapable of distinguishing ourselves from the oncoming truck that's speeding towards us. Possessing an ego is a survival mechanism that helps us to ascertain what is ours versus others. We absolutely need it to survive. And Mary, yes, that's very, very true. And we'll get into that in a little bit. I'm breaking it down slowly so that we can understand it. But there's a massive downside to having an ego. The ego is also detrimentally opposed to self-awareness because being self-aware challenges, provokes, and even sometimes shatters the mask of the ego. And I'll give you a few examples of why. The first example. You're having a fight with your partner for the 50th time this week. In a fit of rage, you smash your fist in the wall. Your partner screams, "Why the hell did you do that, psycho?" And you reply, "I'm not the psycho, you psycho. I intended to smash my fist through that wall. I'm completely fine. Why are you acting like a psycho?" After your partner ends the relationship, you suddenly realize that you've been projecting your issues onto them all along. And you discover how much of an angry asshole you really are. And you realize that you're the one to blame for the relationship breakdown. Ouch. That's a sting of self-awareness, and it hurts like hell. The second example. After scrolling through your social media stream, you start to feel depressed and inadequate. Everyone else seems to have a better and more exciting life than you. You feel like a complete loser for the entire day. And suddenly, you have a light bulb moment. You feel so horrible because you have low self-esteem. Immediately, the thought of having low self-worth makes you feel even more of a loser. And so you suppress and ignore the insight. I could probably tell you plenty of examples, but do you see what I mean? Self-awareness can be often too much for the ego to handle. And this is why it's so important to practice self-awareness along with self-care and self-love. The next reason why self-awareness is so difficult is literally that it's programmed into us to do most things on autopilot. According to the Psychology Today article, we operate on autopilot around 50% of the time. Can you imagine how difficult life would be if you had to remember to breathe, scratch your head, walk, blink, drive your car, use your phone, speak? Most of what we do is on autopilot, and for a good reason. It is much more efficient to live that way. We have evolved to become terrifically time and energy efficient creatures. In order to preserve energy and survive, we need to learn how to do things quickly. Unfortunately, that means that taking a large percentage of our lives can be lived in robot mode. How many of you out there who are listening right now are in robot mode? And therefore, self-awareness is so difficult because our biological programming makes it hard for us to be mindful. So why, you may wonder, should we even bother to develop self-awareness? If our psychology and biology doesn't seem to be working, it seems to be working against us. The answer is that, fortunately, we are so much more than our minds and our bodies. We also possess a heart and a soul. And it is the emotional and transpersonal elements of our being that drives us towards self-awareness. Not only that, but becoming self-aware literally transforms every aspect of our lives for the better. But what are the real benefits of self-awareness? Developing self-awareness is one of the best paths you can ever take in this life, or in your life. You become more authentic and empowered to be yourself. You develop a stronger connection with your intuition and inner wisdom. Your relationships become more loving and peaceful. You are more likely to discover the life purpose. You're able to overcome addictions more easily. You become self-supportive rather than self-sabotaging. You feel more confident in social situations. You're able to change negative habits and mindsets. You're able to take care of your health much more efficiently and effectively. You live a more fulfilling life that is based on your values and not of others. You feel more connected to your soul. You feel more connected with existence. And of course, that there is not an exhaustive list. There are many, 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 many more benefits out there. I just wanted to open a little door to the wondrous world of becoming self-aware. But what are the signs that you lack self-awareness? Are you a self-aware person? Think about this question for a minute. How conscious are you really of the many thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that you exhibit during the day? If you have a tendency to do any of the following, you lack self-awareness. You're often unaware that your words and actions have hurt or offended another person until they express it to you. You're self-destructive and continue to make the same mistakes over and over again. You have trouble identifying what exactly you are feeling or thinking. You struggle to identify what your true needs or desires are. You have a habit of behaving without thinking. You're impulsive. And you're often surprised by people's perception of you as they don't match with how you see yourself. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." Louis C.K. said, "Self-love is a good thing, but self-awareness is more important. You need to once in a while go, I'm kind of an asshole." And Tony Robbins said, "Self-awareness is one of the rarest human commodities." I don't mean self-consciousness while you're limiting and evaluating yourself. I mean being aware of your own patterns. Let's go into the next path of involution, self-exploration. Lord Byron said, "How little do we know that which we are, how less what we may be." Self-exploration, or the study of oneself, is the process of investigating and analyzing our inner thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and ideals. And once we become aware of our internal processes, thinking, feeling, reacting, and decision-making, it is then beneficial to ask why we function the way we do. Self-exploration is often a complex process that involves a lot of introspection, observation, patient consideration, and research. It is important to realize that in order to discover who we are, we need to study who we are. And if you are a self-exploring person, you could be exploring how you think, feel, and behave. And you could be gaining knowledge and understanding of yourself through a variety of means: books, workshops, films, tests, meditation. And in the process of self-exploration, we are developing the ability to divide our attention, to simultaneously be aware of both our inner selves and what we are outwardly considering. But how do we self-explore? We practice self-observation through powerful techniques that include meditation, mindfulness, and entering altered states of awareness, maybe through plant medicine like marijuana, self-hypnosis, and other trance states. You might practice self-analysis. And two amazing ways of doing this include introspection. And here's a tip for you. Combine this with journaling and psychoanalysis or seeing a therapist who can help you gain an objective point of view. For someone like me, who is a certified metapsychoanalyst, this is what I do for a living. This is why I do shows like this, to teach you exactly what I know, not just by it academically, but I've been through this before. What I'm giving you here is a piece of what I went through. The third step in the path of involution is self-discovery. Who am I? This is the question you venture to answer when you begin a journey of self-exploration. Your search to know thyself. And Mary, yes, it is very hard to, if you're in a negative atmosphere. But that is through lack of self-awareness that we remove ourselves. We find the habit that we need to break, and we remove ourselves. It goes into lack of self-awareness. And yes, it is hard to remove yourself if you're in a negative atmosphere. But you have to make yourself self-aware of the situation so that you can remove yourself. And if that means cutting ties, cutting cords, taking a step back, going through a process of self-observation and analysis, then that's what you do. You have free will. You can take yourself out of that process. If you surround yourself in a negative environment, you're sabotaging yourself in a way. Remember, we all have a choice. We choose to be involved or participate in a negative environment, or we don't. We choose to walk off a cliff, or we don't. Free will. Yes, and Karen, you are right. Burn them bridges. I've spoken to, I don't know how many people I come across, clients, followers of mine who ask this same question. I am this, I am that, and they give me a whole scenario, and it's like, why do you put yourself in that situation? Why? If you want to better yourself, you have to remove yourself from that situation. But don't put yourself into a situation where you play victim. Oh, I'm in a negative situation. And I'm just using this as an example, so don't take it the wrong way. You have to really cut cords. Like Karen said, burn them bridges. Perfect analogy. But the other thing is that there are so many people that have the negative attachment. And we find it so hard to remove ourselves because in some way they may be family. They may be friends. And that is where you have to go through a process of analysis where you have to figure out what is your worth. Is it worth going through that and attaching, or is it not? It's totally up to... Otherwise, Gina, if you want, you can message me later. That's fine. Maybe I can explain it a little bit more. But going through a process of self-discovery. Who am I? And self-discovery can be understood as the act or process of gaining knowledge or understanding of yourself. Well done, Gina. I am reading the comments every now and again. And you should. And you should. But at the end of the day, yes. I'm going to get into Love Me More, self-love, self-care. I'm going to go into that topic next week for those who are interested to know what the topic is next week. The next week is going to be how to be a doctor to yourself, your soul, self-love, self-care. But back to the subject at hand. Self-discovery is closely linked with self-exploration because without studying oneself, attaining a degree of self-discovery is impossible. People who live in this level tend to discover the underlying mechanisms and truths upholding many of their beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors towards themselves and the people around them. If you are a self-discovering person, you have attained insight into what and how and why you feel, think, and behave the way you do. And how do we self-discover? Where do we begin? Books, workshops, meditation, online articles, tests. And I'm not talking about the tests you see up on Facebook. Real tests, psychology-based tests, whether there's pseudoscience or not, or pseudopsychology. You can always, like I've said on previous shows, you can always take those tests with a grain of, take the information away with a grain of salt and make your own discoveries by researching. A lot of the content on my website, Soma-Fusion, the articles that I write, for example, is dedicated to helping you learn more about your inner dynamics. And again, you can take psychological tests, not the entertainment tests, the psychological tests. You can learn about your core beliefs. And you can delve into your inner archetypes. And the way that I started doing this, just as an example, I went over to the 16 Personalities website. And I do the MBTI test. I take it every 3 months to see if something about me has changed. I take some other psychological tests every 3 months. I don't take it literal, but I certainly have made some discoveries in the evolution and involution of Katie. If you take your test today, and in 3 months you have had no change, I'd be reflecting on whether you have grown or not. Doesn't mean that you take that literal. It just means that you may be in a time when you are stagnant. Because you're not the same person as you were yesterday. So I'd really question that. If you get the same thing over and over again, I'd start to question it. See if you can find something that you can fix within yourself. That's the whole point of growth. The fourth path of the journey of involution. Aldous Huxley quoted, "If most of us remain ignorant of ourselves, it is because self-knowledge is painful. and we prefer the pleasures of illusion. It is also called self-knowledge, self-understanding. It is the ability to know that how and why you do what you do. And for this reason, self-understanding is closely linked to and often overlaps with self-discovery. People who live in this level tend to have a well-rounded understanding of the origins and reasons behind many of their feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. If you are a self-understanding person, you have a thorough understanding of your strengths, your weaknesses, attitudes, beliefs, motives, defenses, and reactions. Self-understanding is what happens when we learn so much about ourselves to such a deep extent, which began in the last stage, because hopefully by now you've done all your tests or your research to understand yourself, that it becomes assimilated knowledge. And assimilated knowledge becomes knowing when it is actively experienced through applied usage. But how do we practice self-understanding? And self-understanding is the result of integrating and actively applying all that we have dug up about themselves through inner work. Therefore, it is not a question of how to practice it, but rather how to continue living it. And there are ways to continue living what you have learnt through self-reflection, examining and contemplating your thoughts, beliefs, goals, and motivations, asking questions. The beauty of asking questions is that they are simple, yet piercing, and often they get to the root of the matter. Keep asking why, what, and how on your involution journey, and you will develop a deeper understanding of self. Mindfully being around others. Other people are our mirrors. Always remember that. And anything hidden or unresolved within us will be brought up in our relationships with those we are surrounded by. Value your connections as ideal places to develop more self-understanding. There could be no better place to develop self-understanding. And here we go for you, Genia. Self-love. That's the fifth path of the journey of involution. Self-love comes as a result of achieving self-understanding, and it is defined by a compassionate acceptance of your strengths and your weaknesses. Individuals who practice self-love realize that they are imperfect in different ways, but they cease to criticize and punish themselves for these imperfections. If you are a self-loving person, you accept yourself, warts and all. Stop punishing yourself for your imperfections. Develop self-esteem and self-forgiveness. Show self-nurturing behaviors. Respect your needs and desires. But how do we love ourselves? Learning how to love yourself can be pretty goddamn fucking hard. Sorry to say it, but I'm going to be realistic here. While the many articles, books, speakers, and teachers paint an ethereal glow around self-love, that only occurs after, and I mention after, you have gone through the down and dirty inner work of soul searching. Here's some examples. How can you learn how to love yourself more when your mind is literally at war with itself? How can you learn to love yourself when you hate what you see in the mirror? How can you learn to love yourself when your environment is positively toxic and depression? How can you learn to love yourself when you have no positive role models? How can you learn to love yourself more when people label you as being selfish and neglectful? How? Really, how? And while I don't profess to know all the answers, and I never will, I was on this bandwagon for years. And I've experimented with a hell of a lot with myself. I worked through a lot of my own trauma and help others to do the same with some delightful and surprising results. Like I said, I teach. Yes, I am academic, but I teach a lot through experience. And although I won't directly answer all of the questions above, what I will do tonight is provide you the tools, techniques, and teachings and the resources you will need to make the big changes. Like I said, all tried and tested by yours truly. So from my heart to yours, I sincerely hope that this helps to catalyze deep and nourishing changes in your life. So what is self-love? In short, self-love is the forgiveness, acceptance, and respect for those, maybe? No, that's not the right word. For who you are deep down. You, all your beautiful and hideous parts included, warts and all. When you love yourself and you take care of yourself, you honor your limitations, you listen to your needs, and you respect your dreams enough to act on them. When you love yourself, your happiness, your health, and fulfillment are all of supreme importance because you realize that without loving yourself, you will never be able to genuinely love others. What are the benefits of self-love? Self-love illuminates, improves, and deepens every aspect of life. But how do we do it? And what are the benefits? The benefits are more tolerance of your flaws and weaknesses, more confidence, more self-forgiveness, healthier mindsets, improved ability to discover and fulfill your personal destiny, increased love, acceptance, and compassion for yourself and for others, improved relationships, friendships, work life, more authentic connections with people, enhanced joy and gratitude for your life, increased playfulness, creativity, and spontaneity. Go back to childhood innocence. More self-trust, healthier and wiser choices, increased access to new opportunities, improved mental health, less anxiety and depression, deeper access to one's soul and spiritual path. I know I could probably go on forever about the whole list and benefits of self-love. But what I just mentioned to you are the most immediate benefits that come to my mind. But why is it so damn hard for us to love ourselves? I can give you the short answer. I'm going to give you both. I'll give you the long one as well. The short answer is that we were raised in a society and like a family that didn't teach us about self-love. All throughout our lives, we were taught how to read, write, calculate, build, theorize, study, and analyze life. We were taught how to say please and thank you, as well as what was acceptable and unacceptable to others in society at large. Most of us failed to be educated in one essential dimension of life: self-love. Something that continues to shock me up about my own upbringing was the distinct lack of emphasis on respect for oneself and acceptance of one's flaws and virtues alike. And as a child, I can't ever recall being taught the value of loving oneself, of setting healthy boundaries, knowing how to say no and yes when you mean it, and learning how to take care of yourself, even at the expense of others. If you were raised in a culture and society similar to my own, you were probably taught to put others before yourself and to not give much consideration to your own needs. Self-denial and self-sacrifice were the two main values taught in our childhoods and continue to be emphasized as the markers of kind, caring, and worthy human being to this very day. But unfortunately, as I learned later on in life, these two values taught me nothing more than the profound emotional and psychological pain of being self-imposed martyr with no real understanding of how to take care of myself or others for that matter. The result of being taught the value of self-love in childhood and adopting the socially acceptable guise of being a martyr is depression, bitterness, anxiety, resentment, and profoundly flimsy self-esteem. However, even though you may not have been taught how to love yourself growing up, the door of opportunity is still open to you. But before we walk through that door, let's explore one massive myth associated with self-love and perpetuated by the same society that taught you to be an externally focused martyr. Here's a question I pose to you. Is self-love selfish? Every now and again, you may hear explicitly stated or implied that self-love is selfish. Perhaps you live in a family that condemns any form of self-care and celebrates toxic self-sacrifice and martyrdom. Or maybe you work in an environment where self-love is scoffed at or seen cynically. Whatever the case, it's important to nip this massive misconception in the butt. Self-love isn't selfish. Why? Because without taking care of yourself, you are incapable of truly taking care of others. Self-love actually benefits other people, not just yourself. And when you are able to genuinely love and accept yourself, you are able to love and accept others much more fully. And to use an analogy of how an empty cup can be used to quench the thirst of another, it is impossible. Likewise, it is impossible for us to give love if we haven't first filled ourselves. Simple. It's a well-known psychological fact that mistreatment of yourself results in mistreatment of others. As Professor of Educational Psychology Kristen Neff stated, and I quote, self-compassion involves treating yourself with the same kindness, concern, and support you'd show to a good friend. When faced with the difficult life struggles or confronting personal mistakes, failures, inadequacies, self-compassion responds with kindness rather than harsh self-judgment, recognizing that imperfection is part of the shared human experience. So the next time you start feeling guilty for dedicating time for yourself or caring for your own needs, remind yourself that by practicing self-love, you are actually strengthening your abilities to love others. But what does science say about self-love? And there have been numerous studies that have shown how that learning how to love ourselves is beneficial. We already know that self-acceptance is the key to living a happier life. Self-compassion results in making better health decisions. Being kind to yourself results in less anxiety and depression. Self-compassion reduces the stress that leads to procrastination. Self-care can help you reach your goals. Self-love can support you through adversity. Contrary to the popular belief, learning how to love yourself isn't new age woo-woo. It is actually one of the most smartest decisions you can ever make in your life. But yes, I will say right now, there is a dark side of self-love. Learning how to love yourself more might feel warm and fuzzy inside. But it's not always sunshine and roses. The truth is that most people will not want to support you. Not only that, but society at large will continue to bombard you with toxic subliminal messages such as, you have to make people like and accept you. You have to put other needs of other people above your own all the time with no exception. You have to conform to the status quo and fit in. And when it comes to those around you, you have to be unhappy and discontent just like us. The reality is here that most people don't like being truly happy. Instead, they prefer comfort, stability, security, and control. Why? Because safety and predictability is the most comfortable way to live according to sociocultural standards. Unfortunately, the childlike mindset of needing to seek safety is precisely what makes most people so hesitant to support your self-love journey. When you walk the path less traveled, you directly contradict what others have invested so much of their effort into: comfort and mediocrity. Inevitably, you become a threat. By challenging people to reconsider their choices, actions, and mindsets through your behavior, you unintentionally trigger self-doubt in others. And very few people are brave enough to honestly look at themselves and change. The truth is that when you start practicing self-love, you become a social heretic. You stick out. You stop fitting in. You cease being one of those misery loves company sheeple who thrive on self-pity and cynicism. And suddenly, this puts you into a very, very uncomfortable position, a position where you have to choose between taking the narrow path or the wide and easy path. Some of us give up. Others persist. Others of us persist, but end up withering under the weight of social pressure. But then some of us continue on that lonely path, being comforted by a few on the way, but otherwise battling against the constant onslaught of, you're not good enough, you should be like us, you ain't worthy, you're so selfish, you're so insensitive. Loving yourself truly and unconditionally, loving yourself in this era is a breathtaking accomplishment. It is an exceptionally rare practice that many people talk about, but few genuinely know how to walk the talk. That's why people like me do exactly what I do, so that you can stay on the straight and narrow. You can march to the beat of your own drum, authentically. But how do we prevent others from dragging you down? And as we've just spoken about, you will inevitably be faced with people who disagree, disapprove, or outright challenge your desire to make self-love a way of life. But how do we see the bigger picture and prevent them from bringing you down? Those people inevitably bringing you down. Well, firstly, you have to realize that other people are scared and are in pain. One big part of learning how to love yourself more is learning not to take so personally other people's treatment of you. Ask yourself, how can a person who knows conditional love give you unconditional love? That's like expecting a baby to climb a mountain. It doesn't happen, and it can't happen. Therefore, what is the point of mourning the impossible? What is the point of getting wound up and unhappy over people in your life who not only don't support you, but also speak against you? It is their very actions that speak of the abject lack of true love they have experienced. And to be really, really bluntly honest, it's sad and disappointing. Most people not only don't possess unconditional love, they're also caught up in an underworld of fear and pain. And this fear and pain are both sourced from the illusion that they are separate from life, that they are humans having a life experience rather than a life having a human experience. Once you realize that people are scared and in pain, it takes the sting away from their disapproving stares and mistreatment of you. And it frees up the energy to provide yourself with more self-love. And once this realization hits you, you stop reacting to their negativity and start feeling compassion for them. And it is this precise compassion that befuddles them, and sometimes is enough to motivate them to try the same path. You've also got to realize that how other people treat you is a reflection of how they treat themselves. It hurts to be the only one in your social circle trying to take responsibility for your life. It hurts to be rejected by your friends, your family, or both because you are taking a different path. Learning how to love yourself more undeniably hurts badly sometimes. And other times it feels blissfully wondrous. But if there is any lesson you can take away from the way that people treat you, it is this. Their actions often mirrors how they treat themselves. Do you think that a person who mistreats you thinks that they're superior to you? More than often not. The answer is a big fat no. They mistreat you because they are threatened by you in some way, shape, or form. Unless they are clinical narcissists or psychopaths, most people are deeply insecure and fearful. The more you go against the grain, the more threatening you become to them. Understand this, and your ability to practice self-love will become much, much easier and clearer. But is it possible to love yourself unconditionally? Unless you have reached a high level of spiritual maturity and the oneness, unconditional self-love is not something that naturally comes. It's easier said than done. But if you're prepared to work for it, climb that mountain. As spiritual human beings have a human experience, our lives are characterized by the highs, the lows, the plateaus. And in some periods of our lives, we'll celebrate who we are and feel confident in our abilities. In other periods, we will feel insecure, ugly, fat, messy, unlovable, and altogether shitty. But let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this is all normal. In fact, you might go through this cycle within 1 week or even a day. But the important thing here is to embed self-love deeply into your spiritual awakening practice. Then when the time comes and you're challenged, you'll be able to practice mindfulness and awareness. Instead of getting swept up in self-loathing, you'll be capable of practicing self-compassion instead of neglecting your body. You'll know when to practice self-care. Are you starting to get the picture right now? Yes, you might experience mystical moments of complete self-love and acceptance. But it's these fleeting moments that don't last. To make self-love and acceptance more of a consistent experience, you have to practice it consciously every single day. No excuses. So the message here is this. Don't be upset if you alternate between self-love and self-hatred. It's normal to go through ups and downs. But the more you practice embracing yourself each and every single day, the more you'll be able to deal with what life throws at you. Relax. Give yourself a break. Remember that attaining self-love can be just another thing you use to beat yourself up and feel like a failure. Go slow. Go easy on yourself. And as author Mark Kahn writes, whatever arises, love that. That means that you can practice accepting and forgiving all the things that arise in you, including insecurity, shame, guilt, and self-judgment. And like I said, we'll explore more of how to do this later. And like I said, next week is all going to be about self-love. This whole month is going to be about the inner workings and the outer workings of how we deal with ourselves, and how to be a doctor of your soul. So again, we're going to be on at 9 p.m. next week, and we're going to be talking all about self-love and how to be a doctor of your soul. But the next step in our process of involutionary journey of transformation, our spiritual journey, is self-transformation. And when we become self-aware, we undertake self-exploration and obtain self-discovery, understanding, and love. It is then that we become to experience true inner transformation. Self-transformation can be understood as the gradual transcendence of our previous limiting and destructive identities, our ego self. The self-transforming person experiences changes in the way that they live, as well as perceive themselves and other people. Experiences increase harmony with the world, with other people, and themselves. Experiences a death of the old and a birth of the new within themselves. You may undergo numerous mystical experiences and major life shifts. But in the main transformative stage we begin to experience as we become more aware of ourselves, it is the belief that the salvation of any form comes from the external world. To commit ourselves to self-transformation is, in a sense, to lose our life. Not our real life, but the false life of dreams and illusions, the life that we have been conditioned with and taught to believe in by the world. The moment you grow and release yourself from the enslavement of cultural values, along with the unconscious desires of stimulation, possessions, and socially acceptable lifestyles, you begin to feel an enveloping sense of isolation. You begin to experience your own apocalypse. Gradually, we find that our friends and our family find us less interesting, more out of this world, more humorless. Gradually, we find that we don't care for much what we used to. And it is at that point that we start undergoing our own process of spiritual alchemy. A time of self-transformation that involves the death of the old and the birth of the new. As this self-transformation grows within us, we may undergo mystical experiences, profound ego deaths, and other major internal shifts that cause us to grow in true wisdom, compassion, and internal freedom. But how do we achieve this self-transformation? Self-transformation is the result of an accumulation of all previous involution stages. Awareness, exploration, discovery, understanding, self-love. It cannot necessarily be achieved as a static goal, but it is something active that is ongoing and spontaneous. However, self-transformation is often initiated when we are willing to face the truth about ourselves. And perhaps the best method for this is shadow work. The illusion of the ego, dark night of the soul. And finally, The last stage of involution, journey of self-discovery, is self-mastery. The final goal of the involution process is self-mastery, and self-mastery occurs when a person shifts from the false and limited ego self to the expansive and unlimited true self. And this experience is often referred to as moksha, self-realization, Atman, enlightenment, nirvana, kingdom of heaven, promised land, Allah, cosmic unity, annua mystica, mysterium tremendum, cosmic consciousness, union with God, oneness, divinity, non-duality, no mind, samadhi, satori, harmony of the spheres. In this new shift in awareness, the person moves beyond the limited ego and in this sense becomes a master of it, as the ego is no longer in the main driving seat. Self-mastery is rare, but it does include the ability to see and experience the illusion of the ego. It is the ability to simply observe feelings and emotions without identifying with them. It is the ability to realize that we are not our thoughts and emotions. It's the ability to stop reacting out of hatred, anger, embarrassment, jealousy, and other harmful emotions. It is the ability to live life with peace and wisdom. But why not just start off with striving for self-mastery, you might wonder. In order for self-mastery to occur, there often needs to be a thorough exploration of the individual sense of self. This exploration involves loosening old limiting beliefs, undoing the dense core wounds, and generally relaxing the ego structure. Think of it as preparing for a garden. In order to plant a seed, you must have a clean, fertile soil. But when that soil is full of weeds and rocks, it is very difficult for that seed to grow. The same can be said for us. The heavier and more contracted we are, the less likely the light of consciousness will shine through us. We need to clear the way for the blockages and barriers in order to experience illumination and self-mastery. This is a curious paradox, but a separation must occur before you can create wholeness within. In other words, in order to become a master of yourself, there must first be a false self to master. Or spoken in another way, in order to transcend the ego, you must have an ego. To achieve freedom of your thoughts and erroneous perceptions that taint reality is the ultimate liberation. This is awakening, and this is true mastery. True mastery is not based on active control, as eventually we will see that there is no master that is in control. True mastery is, in fact, a passive awareness, a freedom of the false self we carry and emerging back into the oneness, our true home. So to summarize this entire show, to summarize the involution journey, Self-awareness is the moment where we build up enough courage to start facing the truth behind shining awareness on that which we have been trying to escape within ourselves and society. Soon we will begin to self-explore, self-discover, and with enough intensity of awareness, we finally begin to self-understand and grow in self-love. And during this whole process, self-transformation begins to occur. And with enough awareness and grace, this results in the loosening of the false self and the experience of self-mastery. And now that you've reached the end, I suggest for you to take a moment to reflect. What path are you most eager to explore? Where are you on the involution journey? It's good to remember that involution is composed of distinct yet interconnected paths. In other words, each is dependent on the other to achieve the rest. And I would love for you to share with me your thoughts and experiences. You can email me at Soma Fusion Media or Soma Fusion Academy at gmail.com, either or. And tell me your story. Tell me what you've learned, what your journey is. What I've described in this show this evening is the process that I took, all 7 stages. And it's the process of the involution journey that I'm teaching to you this evening. It doesn't mean that I'm right, but there are some valuable information and valuable points that you can take away for yourself and use them as a practical guide to enhance your own philosophy in your own journey. And like I said, I will be back next week doing another massive show on self-love and how to be a doctor of your soul. I've always said that I'm all about empowerment and education, raising awareness for you to live a better life and reach your highest potential so that you're no longer a victim of any situation. Strength through adversity. And with that said, you are listening to Soma Fusion Radio with your host, Katie Kamara, on Soma Fusion Media. Please don't forget to look me up on social media or just go over to my website, soma-fusion.com or somafusionmedia.com. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and let the whole world know what we're learning each week. We have a YouTube channel over Soma Fusion, Mind, Body and Soul. Go and subscribe over there. Make sure that you click the bell. Make sure that you get notified every time we have a show. We've got many shows on Soma Fusion Media with many beautiful, beautiful human beings. And go check them out because we are live almost every single night of the week, unless there's a problem. But yeah, you can go over there. You can support us. You can donate to us. if you support our work, feel free, no obligation. But at the end of the day, please stay safe. Look out for one another. I love all of you, and I hope that I could have been of service to you today. Enjoy your spiritual path. In truth, it is only exciting if what most of us seem to see is pain and suffering and hardship. And from a higher perspective, everything in life that happens serves our spiritual growth. And in realizing this lies our inner peace. Like I said, stay safe, look out for one another. I love all of you. Till next week.